And welcome to the 34th meeting of the Education, Children and Young People Committee in 2024. We have apologies from George Adams, so I'd like to welcome Claire Haughey, who is joining us in his place. As this is the first time that Claire is attending the committee in this capacity, our first item of business is to invite Claire to declare any relevant interests.
I don't have any relevant interest.
Thank you very much. The second item on our agenda is the final evidence session on the Schools Residential Outdoor Education Scotland Bill at Stage 1. Can I welcome our witnesses? Liz Smith, MSP, Member in charge of the bill, Neil Stewart, Senior Clerk, Non-Government Bills Unit, Scottish Parliament, and Claudia Bennett, Senior Solicitor, Scottish Parliament. Welcome to you all, and can I invite Liz Smith to make an opening statement? Ms Smith.
Thank you, Convener. And can I begin this morning by thanking the committee for what I consider has been a very rigorous and very important investigation into this bill. I very much appreciated the commitment that the committee has shown to taking a lot of evidence. That's been very important. But can I also say thank you to the Cabinet Secretary for Education and to the Minister as well, because I think they have been very constructive in their engagement. And not least to thank the outstanding Non-Government Bill Unit and my staff for helping me through this. Their commitment as well has just been second to none. Members know that I received 535 initial responses to the bill. 95% of them were very positive in terms of the principles of the bill. And members also know that there were 38 members of Parliament who supported the final proposal. And you also know that I gave evidence to the Finance Committee on the 19th of November about the costs of the bill. But what I want to do in my 3 minutes just now is to explain to the committee why I believe that this bill is a priority. And I want to start on the basis about building resilience in our young people, or to use what I think the GTCS would say, learning for sustainability, which is part of every single teacher's professional development these days. And I think particularly since COVID, it has become apparent that a lot of our children are needing extra support. They're needing to build their self-esteem, their confidence, their ability to relate to their peers, but also to adults in the school setting. And therefore, I think that the residential experience, which has been, I think, very commendable in its evidence to this committee, but also in lots of other ways, the feedback that we've had from that has really been tremendous. And I want this bill, if it should pass, to be able to complement, not to undermine any other aspect of outdoor learning. And the reason that I'm very fixed on the residential side is, I think, because the compelling evidence from teachers and from pupils is really so much in terms of life-changing experiences, and that's what I think it's all about. As I say, since COVID, I think we have to accept that there's an awful lot of young people out there in our schools who are feeling pretty anxious. I think last week's statistics that came out when it came to additional support for learning, when it came to what is happening in our schools, I think we have to accept that there's a lot of people out there who need that extra support. So that's really the most important reason. And on top of that, obviously, the teachers are telling us that the relationship that they have with young people who've been on these residentials changes much for the better. And that's the same that we get from parents and we get from children as well. So I think the evidence that I've heard throughout my own professional career as a teacher, but also as a parliamentarian, I'm absolutely convinced of the value of residential outdoor education. But the second reason I want to come to is regarding the evidence that the committee has taken with what has been happening in relatively recent times, because I think the current system, although there's lots of really good things happening, but to try to build on the Scottish Government's vision from back in 2010, I don't think the current system is working sufficiently well to incorporate all young people, because this bill is underpinned, I think, by inclusion. That's one of the things I want to do, which I think is very much in line with government policy, is to include all young people. And I think there's also a tremendous lack of data. We've found that as we've worked through this bill, and I think the Scottish Government has acknowledged that there is a lack of data, and there's a bit of a postcode lottery about who is able to go on these residential experiences, and I think we have to try to change that, particularly in an area where the John Muir Award, which was so successful, that's actually been paused just now. It's not happening. So, the last thing we want to get into is a 1970s and 1980s situation where the local authorities lost their dedicated teachers of outdoor education, and I wouldn't like to think that we would end up in any circumstance like that. So finally, I think the committee is very well aware of the evidence provided by the Outward Bound Trust, which was carried out across 8 different countries, including the UK, and it found that for every pound that is invested in outward bound programmes, there's a return of between £5 and £15 in social value. Now, I think, Convener, that is a compelling statistic, and I think it's one that represents a very healthy long-term investment in our young people and society generally. I think it's something that I believe is very much in line with Scottish Government policy, and it's certainly something that is very much in line with what I would like to see young people achieve with this bill.
Thank you very much, Ms Smith, for that opening statement, and I think it covers a lot of the areas that members want to delve into in more depth later on. Can I first of all ask, you have, I think, attended to observe all of our public evidence sessions on this. What did you make of the evidence we received? Is there anything you would like to highlight, anything you would like to pick up on some of the evidence that you heard?
Well, I think the evidence has been largely very positive, and I think it's been very comprehensive. And again, I come back to crediting the committee for the number of evidence sessions that you held and the fact you've taken trouble to meet many of the people who are involved in delivering outdoor education. I think you went on a visit just at the beginning of this week as well. There are issues that have been raised, quite rightly so, and I think it's imperative that should the bill pass at stage 1, I'm able to address these, about whether that's costs, catering for youngsters who have additional support needs, about teachers' time and the commitment they might be required to make. These are all very valid issues that have been raised. I dealt with many of these at the Finance Committee, but I think overall, what has struck me most, and I come back again to what young people themselves have said and what the sector has said itself about they are life-changing experiences. I've watched many young people who would otherwise not have had the opportunity when they've gone out to an outdoor residential centre. They've come back a changed person. And that in today's society, I think, is hugely valuable. So I've been very impressed by the evidence. I very much welcomed the Scottish Government's engagement on this bill for quite some time. And I hope to be able to work with them should the bill pass at stage 1.
And you mentioned the committee visit, myself, Mr Mason and Mr Briggs were at Brownlee Outdoor Education Centre on Monday, and we had a presentation to begin with, and we actually watched a video of a teacher who for many years has brought pupils to outdoor education centres, and he said that the thing that really makes it is the staff. Can you comment about the staff you've met at these outdoor education centres? And certainly everything I've seen and some of the witnesses we've had, it's their professionalism, their dedication and their enthusiasm for outdoor education really shines through.
Yes, very much so. And I think over the years I've visited most outdoor education centres across Scotland, plus many of the other facilities that offer that. But I think what I would say is the professionalism is second to none. And I think people have to realise that outdoor education is evolving. It's not perhaps just the image of people climbing lots of Munros or canoeing or rock climbing and things. I think what has happened in the professional development of many of the people who are delivering this outdoor education is that they are trying to embrace the spirit of Gurfeck, that we have to get this right for every child, whatever their needs are, in an outdoor setting. And I think they've done a huge amount to modernise not just the delivery of what they're offering, but to try to articulate it with the modern curriculum, which I think is very important. And that's quite a valid question that came from the Scottish Government. How would you articulate this with the Curriculum for Excellence? I think it complements it 100%. I think the principles behind the Curriculum for Excellence are exactly the principles that are behind the outdoor education sector. And, you know, I come back to, I think it was Professor Greg Mannion when he gave evidence here. He said, I quote, we should make it an entitlement in the curriculum that everybody gets education in an outdoor setting, and within that we should make it a further entitlement that people get a residential experience. I couldn't agree with that more. So I'm very impressed by what I see, but I'm also very conscious that I don't want to get into a situation where we force all young people into outdoor residential education. That's never the intention of the bill. All I want to see is that the opportunities are there for every child, should they wish, or should their school wish to uptake that.
Yeah. And finally from me, you mentioned the curriculum there. The curriculum in Scotland is largely non-statutory. So why do you believe your bill in this Parliament should put it into legislation?
That's an important question, and the Scottish Government has asked that question too. I think the reason why I think it has to be statutory is that the current system, which had a good vision behind it in 2010 when the Scottish Government set out that vision about outdoor learning and tried to link it with the sustainability aspect. There's a lot of good things in the principles behind that, but I think we have to accept that the current system is not delivering for enough young people. And so that's a non-statutory provision. I don't think we're there yet with sufficient experiences in order to allow all young people to take advantage of that. So that's why I believe that the bill should be put onto a statutory foundation.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll go to Willie Rennie.
So you've already said that the data is patchy. So how do we know the scale of the problem and the scale of the gap?
I think, well, we've worked very hard, as the bill team and my staff have worked very hard. And the Scottish Government, I think, to be fair, in recent months has also been working pretty hard, because I think what's become evident in the passage of the early stages of this is that we do not have enough data to capture exactly what is happening. There are some local authorities, I think you heard from Edinburgh Council, where they're first class with the number. They can tell you exactly how many pupils are going on residentials from Edinburgh. We know across several other local authorities have been using the system Evolve, which is capturing quite a few. We know in Wales, for example, that all the local authorities in Wales know exactly how many people are going on residentials. But it's not a universal outlook. And you're quite right, Mr. Rennie, it's patchy. And I think we have to be very sure that if the bill is to progress, we are capturing more and more of that data as we go forward. And I think one of the things that the bill has raised is awareness that we've not had enough data on that, because we've spent an awful long time questioning each of the outdoor education centres, but all the local authorities, and asking, you know, how many of your young people are there. We've looked at lots of studies that have been done by universities, etc. And I wouldn't pretend for a minute that we've got 100% accuracy in the data, but I think we're getting there, and I'm very convinced that we've got enough, and certainly enough on the background evidence to ensure that the bill is positive.
Okay. So, I mean, you've answered the question about, you know, how this fits in with the rest of the curriculum, so I won't cover that. But a lot of this comes down to what kind of return are we getting for an investment versus other types of investment.
Sure.
So give me your most compelling case as to why the residential element, which is expensive, and it will have ramifications, is better than other types of outdoor learning or even other types of education. What's the case?
The case for me on residentials is what the Outward Bound Trust said, that if you put in £1, you get somewhere between £5 and £15. And that wasn't just evidence that was based from the United Kingdom, that was based from other countries too. And I think that's pretty compelling. That was a very extensive survey that was done. But I also think, I mean, how do you measure all the outcomes from outdoor learning? Because some of them, whether that's nursery provision, what's happening within schools in an outdoor setting, that's all very valuable. How do you measure all that? I think it's pretty difficult. But we have to try. And I do think that the returns that we've seen over the course of looking into all the evidence suggest that residentials it's a very high return.
Some councils are clearly not convinced.
Some councils are not convinced, and some people within councils that have said that they are convinced are not convinced as well. So there's a mix of opinion. And I think the mix of opinion has come about quite rightly because there are questions about cost. There are questions about transportation, because I think you'll find that if you look at a lot of the evidence from some of the local authorities, it's not the fact that they can't get the benefit out of a residential centre, they can't actually get the children there. I think that's a really big issue, and I think that's particularly true for youngsters who have special needs, and that's something that I've tried to address in the financial memorandum. But there are other questions about teachers' time. Would this undermine and take away from other things? I don't think it would. I don't think that happens for those schools and local authorities that are already engaged in this just now. They don't see any undermining of the rest of the curriculum, nor do they see any sort of displacement. So it's not easy. How do you measure the benefits of education? You know, it's a key question.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you. John Mason.
Thanks very much. Well, on the subject of being convinced that this is a good thing, I am totally convinced that this is a good thing, and so you don't need to persuade me about that. And the teachers we met with the EIS, I think it was mainly, the other Monday, and the visit we had on this Monday were both absolutely excellent. So you'll not be surprised, Ms Smith, to know that my questions are around finance, as we're both on the Finance Committee and have previously discussed some of this. So you pointed out the current system is not working, okay, but is really the problem is finance? Is that the real problem?
When I say that the current system, it's not working well enough were the words that I used, because it is excluding too many young people just now. For those who are benefiting from residential outdoor education, the current non-statutory provision is working for them. But it's not universal by any means. We think that probably around a third of pupils in secondary are getting some idea of residential support. In primary, it could be around a quarter to 30%. We don't really know. But yes, it is about cost. Of course it's about cost, because cost matters. Cost matters both in terms of the delivery of the residential outdoor education, but it also matters in terms of the transport costs of ensuring that young people can get to their residential location. And, for some children that might mean quite a journey. For others, it might mean a very small step from, just a few miles from the actual school. So I think there are costs, of course there are, and I've been very keen to engage with the Scottish Government about the level of these costs. We came out with roughly the same ballpark on my financial memorandum, wasn't too different from what the Scottish Government was estimating. I think I'm more than happy to say that I think the costs are probably in the sort of 36 million upwards to 40 million. I'm quite happy with the engagement I've had with the Scottish Government about that. But we've got to deliver the money to finance this. And that's why I've said to the Scottish Government that I've got various suggestions about what we can do to involve the private sector.
Come in more on the question of perhaps using other funding methods. So I'll just stick to the kind of costs themselves.
Yep.
I mean, you've estimated cost, and 30 million or thereabouts is still quite a lot of money. So, I mean, some have said, that's actually not going to be enough. And if we leave the transport, I'll come back to that in a minute, but if we look at the centres themselves, if they are charging, I mean, some of them, I think, I was very impressed on Monday by the centre at West Linton, Broomley, but it could do with a bit of spending on it to kind of modernise it, let's say, and I think that may be true of some of the others as well. So, I mean, are you really convinced that that 30 million or so is enough? Because, there's no capital costs, as I understand it, in that. They're purely charging for running costs.
Well, I mean, these problems would exist whether the bill passes or not. Let's be honest, there is some updating that has to be done. But I think we should remember that in Aberdeenshire, we've got a brand new facility because of the demand is so strong. Wonderful facility. And what the centres are doing, I think it was Nick Marsh when he was giving evidence, was very clear that some of the centres, especially those that were built in the 1930s, are definitely in need of an upgrade. And money has to be found for that. What the bill would provide is an increase in the demand, which allows these centres to obviously take in more revenue that can help with their investment. But some of the centres have already found other ways of investing in that provision.
Okay. I mean, at the moment, parents are contributing some of the money, obviously better off parents, and schools are fundraising for some of the other kids. So some of your money, effectively, some of this 30 million that the government would be paying, wouldn't actually go to the centres or the kids. It would go to the parents, effectively. It would save the parents money, the better off parents. And I've got a slight problem with that. I mean, if these parents are willing to contribute, and I assume we don't have the figures, but I assume it's several million a year at the moment, and then suddenly we're going to save them a lot of money. Is that fair?
Well, can I point to the independent sector, which you will notice I did not include in the bill for a very good reason, that the independent sector schools already provide this through their fee structure. And if we're working towards inclusion, I think that the provision should be available to all youngsters in the state and grant-aided sectors, because why should they lose out when it's a given right in most independent schools as it is now? So I don't think it benefits better off parents to the exclusion of other parents. What I think it does is to have a levelling up basis, and I think you mentioned fundraising, Mr Mason, and I think you're absolutely right. I think, in fact, not only are the fundraising activities in schools generally very successful, I think there's a sort of esprit de corps about the way that youngsters and families contribute to that fundraising, which is all part of the learning experience. Yes. And I would also point out that, as far as we know, the PEF funding, which I think was a fantastic innovation by the Scottish Government, the PEF funding is largely being used for a lot of aspects of outdoor residential education as well. So that, to me, tells me that when it comes to PEF funding, which is obviously, again, about levelling up, that's been very successful in providing more money.
But can I press you on this? Because if some kids already are at the standard that we want them to be, they're getting this residential, and we're talking about levelling up the others or using like PEF money or some similar fund, then wouldn't it be better to target the money we have, which is limited, at those kids? So there would be, say, a top-up fund which schools in poorer areas, and I've certainly got some, could apply to. And that would mean you're still having the parent contribution, but the other schools would get some of the money and it wouldn't maybe cost so much. Yeah,
you made an interesting suggestion on this line at the Finance Committee when I was giving evidence, and I think there's merit in having a look at that opportunity. That's part of providing a diversity to the additional funding that would be required. So yes, I would be quite happy to engage with the Scottish Government if that's where they felt we should go.
Okay, and then transport you mentioned already. I did make the effort of using my bus pass to get to West Linton on Monday, and I have to say it was very successful. The buses aren't all that frequent, but it worked fine. 45 minutes or 50 minutes on the bus from Edinburgh and a 20-minute walk in December. That was okay as well. Do you think there's ways that maybe schools or everybody could save on transport costs by maybe using bus passes more?
You sound as though you're making a good case for being a leader for outdoor education to get there by public transport. But yeah, no, you make a good point about this. There's a huge variation in transport costs because of the fact of geography. Some schools, by definition, have to pay a lot of money for a coach to get a youngster or a set of youngsters out to Lochiel, for example, or Torridon, or wherever it might be. Whereas other schools have got a fairly short trip, and school minibus might provide for that, or a local authority minibus. But I think we can be imaginative about that. And I think, I've spoken to a lot of employers about this bill, and I think one of the things where they value the skills that outdoor education residentials provide. They value that so much. And I think there's scope there for employers to perhaps help with some transport costs in some areas.
So are you satisfied that the costs you've put in would cover like kids from Shetland and Orkney and further away who are going to have much higher costs?
I'm satisfied that there is a sort of mean average of that, because we worked out what it would be for those taking much longer journeys against those with much shorter journeys. So the average, we were quite content with that. I think the Finance Committee was too.
Okay. Thanks, Convener.
Okay. Just at this point, to continue on finance and funding, I'll bring in Miles Briggs.
Just in the interest of full transparency, Mr Mason did get a lift back with the convener to Edinburgh, so I think we should just put that on the record. And as it is a season of goodwill, can I start by paying tribute to the work you've done on this, Liz, because I think it has been really important for the debate, and certainly the people we met on Monday who've been involved. We're really pleased that we are having this debate and what this means going forward. In terms of finance, I wanted to ask, because when we were at the Broomley Centre, they did actually outline some other funds they were seeing groups funded through. The Robertson Trust, I think, specifically was mentioned to us. So I just wondered if there are other examples specifically around how we can take forward different funding by the third sector or philanthropic funding opportunities, and what elements of delivery of the bill the member would see that funding, be it the teaching experience or actually the capacity and capital spend we might need.
Yeah, I mean, there are various trusts around Scotland who have done quite a lot, whether it's the Robertson Trust, the Ganachie Trust in my own part of the world. And I think there's a variety of funding streams out there. PEF is one of them. Philanthropic and charitable provision is as well. But there are also, I think, the models that I gave evidence to the Finance Committee on. I think I sent a letter to the committee here about what's happened in Ireland with Rethink Ireland. And I'm quite convinced that if we are creative and imaginative enough, and if there is a will, which I believe there is, on the side of the Scottish Government as well as on the side of this committee and myself, I think we can make this work. So yes, you're quite right, Mr Briggs, there is definitely scope to look at different funding models. I think Mr Mason's made a good point about some of the possibilities on that as well. But should the bill pass at stage 1, I think this issue is going to be instrumental at stage 2 to ensure that it works. But some local authorities and some of the centres have been very successful in attracting a lot of money. And for example, the Outward Bound Trust, obviously with a charitable trust, it's got a lot of money behind it. It's exceptionally well run. It has delivered wonderful outdoor education for a very long period of time. And I'm very impressed by just their can-do approach to everything.
Same can-do approach from the government, and certainly I thought the solicitor from the government pushed back on that quite a bit when they gave evidence. They were saying there was no examples of this being used to support government legislation in the past, and I think their concern would be, okay, if you get the money in years X, Y and Z and then it stops, how would you respond to those comments?
It's got to be sustainable, as I said at the time I was giving evidence to the Finance Committee. But you know, there are other examples across Scotland of private sector involvement in government policy. I think I'm right in saying HMP Adewell provides, from the private sector, provides a service to the Scottish Prison Service. We've obviously had lots of PFI commitments in days gone by where private sector money was marshalled in by the government as a partnership. And I think when you look, in fact, I think this is a very interesting aspect about public finances just now, and certainly one that is very much on the agenda with the Finance Committee. Scotland needs to have a good relationship between the public and the private sector, like many other countries do. And I think there is scope to ensure that we address the question you've just asked about the importance of ensuring that the private and public sector can work together.
Claire Hockey.
I suppose I'm keen to probe a little bit on this, and obviously I haven't sat and listened to all of the evidence sessions that the committee has, but if you went down the avenue of public trust model of finance, who would be responsible for applying for that? How would the local authorities, I'm assuming, would be responsible? How would they be compensated for the additional burden, the administrative burden? And what would happen if they were unsuccessful in applying for those funds?
Right. A public trust is obviously controlled by the Scottish Government under the model I'm proposing, where the trustees are government appointees. So the government is in control. And as you know, the statutory provision in the bill is that the government would be responsible for disbursing the funds from the bill. Now, should there be an application process? That's a possibility, but I would like to see that the Scottish Government would work with all 32 local authorities, as it has done with PEF funding, to ensure that that public trust model could ensure not only the money that is available for outdoor education centre provision, but to build on the sustainability, as Mr Ross has asked. We've got to make sure that the funding, that's why I'm interested in a trust model, because it tends to have that sustainability within it, as Ireland has proven. Whereby it's not just about the next few years, it's about this for the future, so it's embedded into the whole system. Should it be an application process? I think that would be up for discussion, but as I say, I think the Scottish Government would be able to work with the 32 local authorities to ensure that that money is available for the needs of the outdoor education in that local authority.
Okay. So again, there would be an additional burden then on Scottish Government and Scottish Government officials to facilitate that disbursement of funding.
But the trust model is done overseen by the Scottish Government, by the trustees, who all in a public trust model have the expertise of the, well, in this case, outdoor education and the business models that are required for sustainability. And as I say, if you look at these public trust models elsewhere, they work pretty well. And I come back to the fact that I think that to be able to ensure that the government and private sector involvement, third sector involvement, as Mr Briggs mentioned, that can all come together, because I think the ambitions of all these three groups is the same.
And again, with the public trust model, there would be additional cost to that, because you would need to pay the trustees. You would need to pay for some financial.
Well, it's not for profit making though. It's different from a charitable model of trust. It's a not for profit making model. So that's quite different in a way from the charitable model, where obviously they can make profits on that basis.
I absolutely get that. I suppose what I'm trying to get at here is there seems to be no provision for this within the financial memorandum. So this would be in addition to what's the year 1, year 2, year 3. I'm just looking for a bit of clarification. I'm not trying to trick you here. No. I'm just looking for a bit of clarification.
No, fair question. The government would have a responsibility. Whatever model we use, the government would be responsible for this bill, should it pass. So the costs of that provision are within the financial memorandum. How we choose to administer it is up for discussion.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, and just finally, before we go to Jackie Dunbar, on finance, when a bill reaches a certain threshold, the cost of a bill, a financial resolution is required. If the government are bringing forward the legislation, they lodge it. You cannot lodge it as a member of a non-government bill. It has to be lodged on your behalf by the government. Again, you heard the questions that were put to the Minister on that. What was your reaction to the response of the Minister, saying on one hand that they were neutral on the bill, but they were not certainly at the moment looking at lodging a financial resolution?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, Convener, that the responsibility to lodge the financial resolution lies with the Scottish Government, and I hope they would be positive in my request. I wrote to the Government last month to request that they lodge a financial resolution, and I feel that the Minister has said, I think on 3 different occasions, that the response is neutral. So if the response is neutral, I would expect them to lodge a financial memorandum. But that's a matter for the Scottish Government.
Mr Stewart, you might not have anything to add, but just with your experience with other non-government bills, is the approach taken by the government consistent, or is it different with this one?
I don't think I have anything to add to what the member has already said on that particular issue. The standing orders are provide that the government has to lodge the financial resolution motion, and it's then for the Parliament to decide. And obviously, the bill can't proceed to stage 2 if it's not lodged. But
okay, thank you, Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. Just got a couple of quick questions. There's been a suggestion that your bill could create a narrow focus on only one type of outdoor learning. Do you agree with that suggestion? What's your views?
I don't think it would undermine any aspect at all. As I said in my opening remarks, it is complementary to. It was just focusing on one type of outdoor learning, not undermining. Yes, it is a more narrow focus, but then you can say that about lots of aspects of education anyway. But I think the answer to that question is it too narrow? No, I don't believe it is, because I think this is a piece of the jigsaw that is all about outdoor learning. And I come back to what Greg Mannion said in his evidence, that we should be providing that opportunity for outdoor learning for all pupils, and the residential part of that is a further entitlement. And he said that's not a big ask. So I think the narrow focus is, I chose the residential aspect because of the compelling evidence that we were getting about the benefits of it. And I think it's that piece of the jigsaw that I'd like to see in place to ensure that there's an all-round experience for young people in the outdoors, but that complements and articulates with the curriculum for excellence.
Okay. How do we get to make sure that every child does get the same experience? Because we've heard from some witnesses that the schools from poorer areas could go in winter because it's cheaper, which I disagree with. But that means that schools from different areas would have different experiences if that was going to be the case. So how do we ensure that schools in every area gets to choose whether they want to go on winter, not because of the price, or they can go in summer if that's what they'd like?
Excellent question. And we have to ensure that this is about inclusion, and it's about providing equity across the system. That's one of the reasons that we have to have additional funding to ensure that resource is there to allow young people from every background to participate in this. And I think it's very important that should the bill pass, that we have an engagement with the local authorities, with the outdoor sectors, to ensure that we are coping well with young people who do not have the privilege that some of their peers might have. And actually, if you look at the overall evidence, some of the most compelling and positive evidence that is provided is from young people from disadvantaged backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And that swings it for me. I mean, I've always, people know my professional background was an independent school, and I always felt it was wrong that other young people across Scotland were not able to benefit what I could see was happening on a regular basis in independent schools. This is all about inclusion. This is about ensuring that all young people have a similar outlay. You'll never make everybody's outdoor education experience identical, but that they have that opportunity, because I think Mr. Rennie asked at the beginning, what's the value, the return on the value of that for many of these young people? It's perhaps even greater.
Is that included in your financial costs?
Yes.
So that every school will have the same level playing field as so to speak?
It's built on equity and inclusion, yes.
So I'll go on to my next question. If the bill, have you spoken to the government in regards to if the bill shouldn't pass? Is there any non-legislative approach that you would like to have if the bill wasn't to pass.
I hope that doesn't happen, but can I just say again that the government has been very engaging. I've been very pleased with the very constructive discussions that I've had both with the Cabinet Secretary and also with the Minister. I think there is a genuine commitment that the principles of this bill are the right ones, because I don't see how anybody could argue that they don't articulate with what we're trying to do in Scottish education just now. I think they articulate with the Curriculum for Excellence. I think they articulate with the Scottish Government's approach to learning for sustainability. And so I think there's a very firm commitment. Does it have to be statutory? I come back to the answer I gave earlier to say that we've tried the non-statutory route. Some of that has worked, but some of it isn't working. And I think to ensure that we have that inclusion and equity, we perhaps need the statutory route.
Okay. So you wouldn't consider it a success unless the bill went through?
I mean, as I say...
Sorry, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth.
I want to engage. I hope I've been constructive in my engagement with the Scottish Government, and I will continue to be as constructive as we can. What I want at the end of the day is that young people in Scotland all have the opportunity, even if they don't all take it up, they all have the opportunity to participate in residential outdoor education.
Thank you.
Bill Kidd.
Pardon me. Thank you very much, Convener. Ms Smith, the practicalities of implementation you've spoken about, and many stakeholders have raised concerns around these practicalities of delivery, such as the capacity of the outdoor education residential sector, which we have in existence in Scotland, during school term times, and thereby tracking the participation of young people from those schools. What are your key concerns when it comes to ensuring the delivery of implementation, and how would you propose that these concerns are overcome?
Yeah, these are good questions, and they've come up from several witnesses. I mean, I think when it comes to the provision, I mean, we've obviously seen closure of a number of local authority ones, particularly outdoor education centres, but the actual bed space capacity is quite impressive. And you heard from the Outdoor Education Centre about some of the expansion that has happened. We've obviously got this new centre in Aberdeenshire. So I think from that angle, you know, there is this expanded provision of bed space. But I also think that when it comes to tracking young people, CMIS has been one of the systems that's been used to ensure that there is good quality tracking. But, you know, there's no doubt about it. Some outdoor education centres need an update. And that was admitted foursquare by some of the people from the sector themselves. But what they're looking for is a regular commitment to young people participating in this, so that they know that there is that regular income. And I think one of the interesting things, and it comes back to the question that Jackie Dunbar asked me, that the number of pupils that are going away out with the normal sort of period, which tends to be sort of spring, summer, is actually increasing. And I think that's a very positive reflection on what the sector has done to make itself more attractive to a wider range of pupils with more diverse activities.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So, should the duties in the bill be qualified to allow for exceptions to be made for where delivery of residential outdoor education might prove impractical, such as when a pupil moves school and misses the trip at the school that they were in, and then it's already happened at the school that they're going to? So is that just unfortunate?
There will always be circumstances, as there are now, when a young person misses out for a variety of reasons. It could be illness, it could be family circumstances. But when it comes to changing school, the method of tracking in schools is very much better now than it has ever been. And if a youngster goes to a new school, that new school will be able to track what activities and what curriculum the youngster has undertaken at the previous school. And as I say, that CMIS system seems to be working pretty well on giving much better tracking information.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Evelyn Tweed.
Thanks, Convener. Good morning, Ms Smith and panel. Could I just say, first of all, thank you for all your work on the bill. It's actually been a pleasure to work on this bill with the committee. Do you feel the bill allows enough flexibility to allow schools and local authorities to tailor outdoor experiences to the needs of their pupils?
I think that's a very important question that you've just asked. And yes, it has to be flexible. I mean, let's be honest, the curriculum in Scotland is flexible. And I think it benefits a lot from that flexibility in principle compared to other systems, which are not too far away from here, where it's been a much more rigorous curriculum and it's run into difficulty. So flexibility is important. And I think that local authorities and local schools will take a very different perspective on what kind of education that they want to facilitate. And residentials needn't be in the outdoors in terms of outdoor activities. It can be an outdoor learning for a language trip or a history trip or whatever it might be. That's important. These are just as valuable in the educational experience than anything else. So that flexibility is absolutely vital. What I come back to all the time is that the evidence proves that those youngsters who are on residentials, they have a benefit on attainment, on behaviour, on confidence, the ability to have good relationships with not only their peers, their staff. I think that is always very compelling. So that doesn't take away from the flexibility angle. In fact, that enhances the flexibility angle, because if you're doing your best for every single child, a different residential experience might be different for each child, and that's very important. And, Pam Duncan-Glancy has given some very good evidence to this Parliament about the additional support for learning needs. And my goodness, last week we saw what we still have to do to enhance the provision for additional support for learning. And I have found the evidence provided for places like Ardroy and some of the other residential experiences. In fact, we have some residential outdoor centres now who are concentrating on that. It's very compelling. But you're quite right to ask that question, because I think flexibility is an important principle.
Thanks, Ms Smith.
Okay, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning. Thank you for the evidence that you've submitted so far, and also for the engagement with committee members throughout the process. Like others across the committee have said, I'm really positive about the aspects of this bill and what it could do to improve the life chances of young people. And I think the members put forward a really compelling case actually on it. There are a couple of issues, as the member will be aware, that I think we need to explore maybe a wee bit further. And one of those is, as we've just finished on actually, the needs of pupils with additional support needs. So I just wondered, what is your assessment of what happens now in terms of pupils with additional support needs in relation to your bill?
Well, generally speaking, of the facilities I've visited, and certainly those who gave evidence to my cross-party group on residential outdoor education and the evidence to this committee, I think there's been a huge leap forward to help young people with additional support needs. And I think you've seen some of the video evidence of that, and it is life-changing and very important, and they've come back with a completely new outlook. We are not catering for every single child with additional support needs, but I think you can say that generally in education across Scotland. And we have to do more. But what's been so important in the development and the evolution of the provision at the moment is that those providers are very conscious that if they are going to win a gold award or they're going to get a good inspection, they have to be able to up their game to ensure that young people with additional needs have exactly the same opportunities as anybody else. So I think the awareness has definitely improved markedly. And I think the provision across most of the centres, not yet all of them, but most of the centres, and the fact that they're using teachers and volunteers, and in some cases parents of those children who have these needs, I think it's pretty impressive.
And do you think that if this were a statutory responsibility, that is something that would continue, or do you think there would need to be additional
It has to
aspects?
continue. I mean, I would be very dissatisfied if the bill passed and we were still excluding the opportunity for some youngsters. Then, you know, that's no good to me. We have to be able to ensure that we're making this provision for all young people.
In your discussions with the government, what has their response to the issues around pupils with additional support needs accessing residential outdoor activity been?
They flagged up the cost, quite rightly so. I mean, there are costs, as you will know, about transportation, specialist equipment, specialist provision for staffing. That's part of the financial memorandum. But, you know, last week's statistics, which I know you were leading on for the Labour Party in Parliament, I found these statistics, you know, pretty grim. About the fact that the additional support for learning, we've got a long way to go to ensure that we're looking after them as well as we should be. I think the government has acknowledged that. And so I hope this bill would help in some respects, particularly on these life-changing experiences that you get from the outdoors.
And some of the teachers who've given evidence to committee on this have said that in order to do that properly for pupils with additional support needs, there would be more staff and resource required. Yeah. Do you agree? And how do you think you
could? I mean, obviously, in some cases, additional support needs require a smaller ratio of staff to the individuals. And, you know, if you're going to watch this video of this youngster who had significant disabilities, but he was on a climbing wall, and instead of just one person being able to support him there, it took 3 people to do that, and that's absolutely right and proper. So there are costs in that. But, you know, the smile on that person's face that he'd managed to achieve what he did says it all for me.
And actually, one of the things that, you know, I hark back to my time in the disability movement, and many disabled people have said over years, you know, sometimes it does mean more resource, but actually to achieve that parity is quite important. Could you set out for the committee how you've considered those additional resources in your financial memorandum?
Yeah, I actually started off with it because I'm very passionate about support for additional needs. It's something as a teacher rather than a politician that I've always had a passion to try to ensure that we are providing for all young people, whatever their needs. And so I started with some of that. I actually spent quite a lot of time on the additional support needs aspect because I see them as so important. And I think over time, I went to visit quite a lot of centres. You're probably aware there was a member of the Welsh Synod, Sam Rowlands, who was putting through a bill in the Welsh Parliament, and also Tim Farron in the Westminster Parliament. And we took a lot of time to talk about additional support needs in different centres across the 3 different jurisdictions, and it flagged up to me what we have to do to ensure that there is that extra provision. And, you know, there's a question about equipment, and I was very interested what the centres were saying is that, you know, at one stage people were saying you're going to have a huge amount of extra money just to kit out people with clothing and boots and things, and actually most of the centres have all that. But that's not enough for some people with additional support needs, where the extra equipment that you require if you're engaging in whatever activity it might be, that's vital. So I started with that because I was determined that this bill, if anything, was going to include a lot of young people who do not at present time get the experience that I'd like them to have.
Thank you. And just one final question, if that's okay, Convener. Do you think does the member think there is any progress can be made, particularly for pupils with additional support needs, without the bill?
Well, some progress has been made, and yes, I'm sure there could be some. Is it enough? I don't think so. But that's true for other young people as well. So that was the reason for bringing Bill forward in the first place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Convener. When we were at the Broomley Centre, something which stuck with me following that visit is it's been 80 years since actually there's been a significant piece of legislation in the UK, the Butler Act of 1944, to expand outdoor education, and that's the foundations of why that centre was built. So I wanted to ask a question in regards to capacity in the sector currently for that increased demand. And we had some very useful data shown to us about peaks and troughs. That is obviously very much around school holidays, let's face it. So I just wondered what work had been undertaken in the bill to envisage what that would look like, and not necessarily centres, but also what you mentioned around camping, hostels as well. And to what extent different models could be taken forward.
Yeah, well, just to take a historical line on that, you're quite right that in terms of major legislation, that is a very accurate summary of what was happening. But in the sort of 60s and 70s, the local authorities in Scotland all had a dedicated teacher of outdoor education, and these people were very important in sort of making sure that these different local authorities had a good provision right across the board. And that worked really well until the 1970s and the 1980s, for a variety of different reasons. These teachers were slowly lost. And I think you can probably track a lot of the evidence back to the time where we saw quite a downturn after that period in the numbers who were actually able to facilitate outdoor education. And throughout the sort of later period of the 20th century, it was again getting very patchy about what was provided and what wasn't provided, but there was still a determination within the local authorities to do that. And I think that determination is still there, but we shouldn't forget what COVID has done, because COVID meant that the outdoor education centres couldn't function, because they couldn't take any of it. And I was enormously grateful to the Scottish Government for making the provision of the initial £2 million and another £1 million to support the sector throughout the COVID period. And had the Scottish Government not done that, there would be even more centres that would have floundered. So I think we owe the Scottish Government a debt for doing that. And I know that the outdoor education sector would say that themselves. So can we build up that capacity again? Yes, I think we can. But I think it needs a strong level of regular demand, which the bill would provide, obviously, to these centres. And as I say, there are positive signs. I mentioned Aberdeenshire, a completely new facility. But there's obviously some good signs that other outdoor facilities are working pretty hard to expand their facilities as well, and the diversity of what they offer. Because that's an important point historically as well, that when you went to an outdoor education centre in the past, it was what I would call traditional outdoor education, that you would spend a lot of time possibly camping, but climbing hills, kayaking, canoeing, mountain sort of climbing, all sorts of things like that. Outdoor education is changing. That's still included, but it's changing, and that diversity plays to the different needs of young people these days. And I think it's important that the centres have recognised that, because I think they've done a lot to try to improve all that side. Yeah. But that's an important question.
Can I just ask, in terms of what current capacity there is, and as an Edinburgh MSP, I see my schools benefiting from the centres which we have, Aberdeenshire, the Ayrshires as well, having that opportunity. Do you see this actually as trying to correct that postcode lottery which we've seen now created, where councils have actually continued to value or allowed it to be disappeared? Yeah,
no, Edinburgh is a classic example of doing everything that we'd like to see, because not only do they have very good data and background evidence of what's actually happening, but they have, I think, put a very high priority on it as well. Now, that's not to say that other local authorities don't want to do this. I think more local authorities have felt the pressures of finance. And when it comes to the 13 local authorities that have been using the Evolve system to try to track what's going on, I think there's a move within quite a lot of the other local authorities to try to improve things. But it's difficult. And some local authorities don't have the facilities in such number. And that might include some youth hostels as well. So I think it is difficult. Yeah.
Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Ross Greer.
Thanks, Convener, and apologies for being late and urgent. But what I thought was simple task this morning turned out not to be so simple. But I was watching on the live feed, so I think I've caught most of the session before I got here. Certainly caught Mr Briggs grassing Mr Mason up for his transport options. But if I could just follow on briefly from Miles' line of question there around centre capacity. Ms Smith, you'll be aware of the Blair Vaddock Centre in my region, but run by Glasgow City Council, because I think it's an interesting example in that at the moment it's fully booked all year round, but there's a balance there of the council's own bookings for schools and some commercial bookings which subsidise the school work. How would you respond to the suggestion that increasing the obligation to provide space for schools could displace the commercial work and actually push some centres into a more precarious financial situation, because bluntly they can charge more for the commercial bookings than they typically could for a school booking?
Absolutely, and that's an important question as well, because I think that, you know, the worst thing that could happen is if somewhere like Blair Vaddock, which is excellent, was to, because of the financial system, was wanting to take far more people who were going to pay, you know, from a commercial rate, rather than providing for schools and young people who are involved in Scouts or whatever else it might be. So that would be a worry if that happened. But I think the reason for this bill is to try to ensure that the centres are well used, as well as obviously offering an educational experience to the young people who are involved in participating. And I think that the demand level, from what we hear from those who've given evidence, the demand level is sufficient. And the bookings are sufficient just now. And as I mentioned earlier, increasing on a year-round basis, which was not the case when I was leading outdoor education myself. I mean, you were stuck with sort of April to October in my day. And that's changing, and that's a good sign, because that's opening up more facilities. And those people who are working through a commercial angle are often not always wanting the same time period. So I think there's greater scope for provision, but I would worry greatly if the commercial side took over from the school side.
Excuse me, moving on to a totally different area question, but one you'll be familiar with because we covered some of this ground around the FM in Finance Committee. The response from trade unions to this has been interesting, in that I think there's a really significant well of support from teachers for giving more pupils access to residential outdoor education, but quite understandable concern from them that this would essentially formalise what at the moment is an informal system relying on voluntary contributions from teachers and significant goodwill from them. How do you respond in particular to the suggestion that if this was put on a statutory footing, that it would then have to go to the SNCT to be considered as a renegotiation of teachers' terms and conditions?
Well, all aspects of teacher contracts have to go for that tripartite negotiation. That's not a matter for me. That would be for the government, local authorities, and for the unions. Quite rightly, that's the basis for these negotiations. I think the evidence that was provided by the unions, as you say, it was interesting, and it was important evidence, because if we can't take teachers with us on this, then, you know, we're not going to go very far, because teachers are a very important part of all this. And I was struck by the evidence that the unions did provide about the benefits that outdoor education provides. All of them were supportive of the principle, but they rightly raised concerns, which you've echoed, about how that would work when it comes to teacher contracts. There are some teachers who would not be in favour of this bill, but there's an awful lot of teachers who are in favour of this bill, from whom we've heard an awful lot, and we got it in the initial responses, who believe that it wouldn't undermine the voluntary aspect either. Would it have to have a renegotiation? I'm not sure it would, but I'm not an expert in these renegotiations. I actually think an awful lot of things that are going on in the provision as it is currently works very well. I think schools manage that very well. There's a lot of teachers who are very keen to participate in outdoor education or outdoor visits. Do I see that as a major problem? I don't think I do, but nonetheless, I'm very conscious that I need to be able to take all teachers with me.
As someone who's really keen to support the bill, I suppose that's probably my chief area of concern, particularly as it relates to the financial memorandum and the wider costs of this. Because the system at the moment, as I say, it relies really significantly on the goodwill and voluntary time of teachers. I think it would be reasonable to expect teachers to still broadly be willing to do that. But there's a question of fairness there, and I struggle to think of many other areas of employment where we would move something onto a statutory footing and essentially oblige schools to provide it, and de facto then oblige teachers to provide it as part of their employment, but to still not pay them for it. So,
the counter to that is that if we really believe that this is worth doing, then we will make sure that we can do it on the basis of the expertise, the professionalism and the willingness of staff to engage with it. And there are a large number of teachers across Scotland just now from all different schools who know that this is the right thing to do because of the educational benefit. And that's important.
I would agree absolutely with that. So, last question around this area. I'd be interested in your thoughts on the suggestion that's been made that perhaps it doesn't actually require as many classroom teachers accompanying pupils on the trips as has historically been the case if the centres themselves have their own centrally employed teachers, appropriately qualified youth workers, etc. So certainly I think the typical experience is 2 classes in Primary 7 go, both the Primary 7 teachers go, but there's a suggestion that maybe only one of them would be required if the centres have an appropriate number of their own appropriately qualified staff.
That comes back to the flexibility issue that Evelyn Tweed asked about, because there are centres now who are hiring in professional expertise for various activities, and there are some who are choosing to send quite a number of staff from their own school, alongside some parents sometimes, from carers, from people who are former pupils of that school who've had a good experience, who want to come back to help. I think there's a great flexibility in that, and that's how it should be. And I think the more you have that flexibility, the more people are inspired to take part, the more you condition it down to an expectation of what a teacher must do, the less I think you'll find that they're willing. The reason I believe that teachers are so keen on this is because they know the value, not just to the youngsters, but to themselves as a professional in a classroom. And that, for me, is the key thing about this bill.
Thank you. I think that's an excellent line to end on.
Well, I suppose just to press that a little bit further, certainly what we have heard is the impact it has not just on the pupil, but the teacher teaching that pupil for the remainder of the year. Brownlee were telling us on Monday that September's a big month for P7 and S1 classes, because those transition years, they have noticed a real difference. So I take Ross Greer's point and the spirit he was asking his question, but there's clearly a benefit of seeing your own teacher in that environment as well. Is that what you've picked up?
Absolutely, and I can speak with many years of personal experience. I think the youngsters can see a teacher, me, not always getting things right, and you learn from that experience. They can also see you getting things right most of the time, and I think they learn from that too. We learn about our own professional expertise and how to handle different youngsters, and I could quote many youngsters that I had taught at Watson's College, whereby they were some of the pupils who were not flourishing in the classroom at all, some of them maybe not too keen on school, but who absolutely flourished in the outdoors. There were other youngsters who you thought would be, absolute star, and they were not quite as good as they thought they might be. And I think that educational experience, that social experience, is vital, and I think it enhances the relationships that you have with your peers, but it definitely enhances your teacher-pupil relationship both ways. And if anything, you learn so much as a teacher from that. I think I learned, I was a teacher for 16 years and I still contribute to a lot of outdoor education. I learned so much from just watching youngsters who might have thought that they would never be able to do something, and they did. And they come away a different person. And you're right, Mr. Ross, it's about the long-term They do better in their exams, perhaps. They do better in their attainment. They take part in extracurricular activity. You know, that swings it for me. If we're going to, and as we have to be concerned about our young people and the outcomes that we can deliver, this contributes to that.
Yeah.
It's not the only thing, but it does contribute.
Yeah. And not a question, just a comment. At Broomley, what we saw on Monday was the groups had one from the outdoor centre, member of staff, and one teacher, and I thought that mix worked very well. So the teacher was learning to take back into the classroom, but also you were getting the experience from someone from the centre. I'll take Jackie Dunbarton at this point.
Thank you, and I agree with what you're saying, how good it would be if that was to happen. But I do have a concern, going back to the teachers' meeting that we held. You know, we could be asking teachers to clock on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock and not clock off again till Friday at 5 o'clock, and asking them to volunteer that time. And not all teachers are able to. They want to be part of that experience, but family life or care responsibilities actually permit them to prevent them from doing that. And we also heard from one teacher that there's going to be hidden costs as well. You know, if a classroom is going to an outdoor centre, they may require at least one additional teacher to come with them in case a child with additional support needs has to go home because they're not coping. So, you know, you're going to have like the teachers that are required and also teachers on call, so to speak. And all those salaries need to be paid for. And I kind of don't see that in your financial memorandum. So how do we you know, square that and so that we can go forward with the concept that you're suggesting? Because I would love to go forward with it. My worry is, how are we going to pay for it all?
Well, I think most of that is captured in the financial memorandum, but let me go back to your first point, which is very important about teachers clocking on at 9 o'clock and coming off at 5, although I think many teachers will tell you that's not quite the hours that they're doing now. I think they're probably in the class.
While they were at the centre, because they have to.
Well, it's a full-time experience when you're at a centre. Yes. I mean, you nowadays you are in charge for 24/7, yes, as it should be.
But how do we compensate the teachers for doing that?
Well, I mean, there are some schools that will provide the staff with additional facility for childcare, or for making provision for some of the outdoor equipment that they might need but don't have. So that goes on already. And there are some aspects of teachers who are able to enjoy benefits from you know, extra payment or extra days off in lieu of that. So I think there's a flexibility in some of that. Are we going to be able to pay them all an extra salary for doing all that kind of stuff? No, I don't think so, because you could argue that if you take on anything new in a curriculum that you have to have an increment in the salary. That doesn't happen. This is all part of the, you know, what would come back to teacher contracts. Mm-hmm. But you can't go on just, you know, giving a salary addition for every additional thing. That teachers will argue very strongly that they've had an awful lot of extra work to do, rightly so in many cases. But they don't get paid for that extra work. In fact, that's one of the bones of contention sometimes, obviously. So I don't think that's a major issue. And I certainly think that the numbers of teachers who are already engaged in this disproves the point that there's a major problem about it. You know, to come back to the point about not forcing, you can't force teachers into doing this if that's what they don't want to do. But I don't think schools are doing that. Schools are using the staff who buy into this. And you know, by no means are all school staff in Scotland going on residential outdoor education. It doesn't work like that. And I wouldn't want a circumstance where you force people, because if you start forcing people, you're in trouble. Yeah,
but if we're going to make it statutory, then how do we ensure that every child gets it if we're not ensuring that there is the teacher feed-in that it's going to happen?
Well, I think there is the teacher feed-in. I think the evidence that the committee has received and the evidence that we had in all the submissions, I think the teacher buy-in to this is big. really big.
Because the meeting that we had, there was great concerns.
Yeah, there are, as I said, there are some members of the teaching profession who would not be keen on this bill. I think I said that earlier. But there's an awful lot who are. And it's these ones who I want to capture in terms of their enthusiasm, commitment, their expertise, their professionalism. They're doing a wonderful job. And I think this bill would enhance the opportunities to expand on that professional development and at the same time obviously give a lot of benefits to young people.
Okay. I think I'll just leave it at that because I don't think we'll agree.
Okay. Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Convener. And actually the member and other members on the committee have addressed a large part of this. I suppose I just wanted to put on the record some concern, and the member will know about this, that has been raised, that we're already in a situation where teachers are delivering about 11 hours a week on average, I think research has suggested, for free. And the environment in which they are expected to do that is becoming far, far more challenging. And I know the members already alluded to some of the data from last week. So I suppose against that, we've heard, goodwill to do these things wane slightly. That would be my concern about it. I suppose, having to make this part of a core responsibility. And as I said earlier, I understand why, because there are inequities.
Yeah.
So how would the member respond to that?
There are concerns because, let's be honest, being a teacher these days is all consuming in terms of the commitment that you have to make on a whole lot of different things, not least of a lot of the legislation has compelled them to do. So it's not an easy job being a teacher, but it's a very important one. And I think that the numbers of teachers who have shown willingness to participate in this believe that it is a priority. In other words, I think some teachers might argue they prefer to be out in the outdoors rather than doing some of the other stuff that they're asked to do because of the benefits that they can see. So I don't think there's a problem in convincing teachers that this is the right thing to do. You're quite right to flag up that the curriculum is packed with a lot of other things and the commitment they have to do non-teaching, as in out with the classroom. That's grown enormously over the last, I left teaching 20 years ago, and it's a huge change in that. So I think we have to be mindful of that. But I don't see any sign that a lot of teachers are withdrawing from that kind of activity.
I suppose the concern was that we might not see it quite yet, but if the trajectory continues in terms of what they're experiencing within the teaching environment just now, as you've alluded to, that they could begin to start worrying about the additional commitment.
Well, we saw a downturn in the 1980s when the playing fields scenario cut a lot of the extracurricular activity for quite a lot of schools. We saw a big downturn in the number of teachers who were responsible for looking after football or rugby or hockey or whatever it might have been. That's beginning to come back. I've been very interested in the number of extracurricular activities that are happening in some schools where there had been quite a big decline. And I think that represents an understanding in a lot of schools. And to be fair to the Scottish Government, I think it recognises this, that the physical activity, sport, the benefits from that are pretty compelling as well. And so we're starting to see an upturn in the number of schools that are going back to running more teams and to taking part in more facilities. And you can see that in local tournaments these days. There's lots of youngsters who are now involved at schools who previously pretty much shut down their extracurricular activity in the last part of the 20th century. And that's good to see that.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just go back to one final point? Mr Mason was raising the issue about this bill potentially would benefit better off parents who currently pay for these activities if it is funded then by the government. And your policy memorandum says this: the member considers that any system created ought to be based on substantial funding from the Scottish Government, but accepts that flexibility could potentially be retained to use different funding streams such as school fundraising activities, and also to enable parents or carers who can afford to make a part contribution towards the cost. Could you just explain that a bit more and the flexibility you're speaking about and how that would work in practice?
Yes, there are some circumstances where parents who have more means than others who are contributing more in the way of the fundraising activities that would happen in a school, as in taking responsibility and putting in a bit more money behind that. There are some that are making provision for transport costs, whereas other kids are not getting that. And some schools are having to subsidise on that basis. So I think Mr Mason's right to question this, because there are obviously parents who have greater means than others. Would they be able to go ahead and pay a bit and other children don't? I think it's worth exploring that. But what I wouldn't want to happen, wouldn't see happen, is that the sort of level playing field was removed because of that. So could we part fund it? Could we use PEF money for some other youngsters? I think that's a possibility. That's one I've discussed with the Scottish Government, because we know that there are some schools, certainly some in my region, who are using PEF funding to subsidise youngsters who are not able to go, but yet other parents are paying in that school for the activity. So I think there's some scope to discuss that.
Leave that flexibility is there just now, or is that something you think if we get past stage 1 you would look to bring back with amendments or anything at stage 2?
I might consider amendments to that if I felt that was something that the committee might like us to pursue. But I think, again, it comes back to a patchwork just now of what's happening. I think some schools are have a bit of a mix on how it is funded. But I certainly think there is scope for flexibility in how it's funded overall, should the bill pass.
That's helpful. We've gone through all the members' questions. Is there anything final you would like to say on behalf of your bill to members?
Can I just finish again? I have spent an awful lot of time on this bill in terms of bringing it to Parliament, but I have particularly welcomed the engagement from this committee and the Finance Committee. I would like to credit the Scottish Government for its engagement. I will just finish on the point that I think if we want all young people in Scotland to experience the kind of education that society deserves and wants to see, that this bill can make a huge difference in terms of inspiring confidence, self-esteem, resilience, giving them an extra dimension that too many children are missing out on.
Thank you very much. Can I thank you for your time today, and those of the officials from the Non-Government Bills Unit and from Parliament. I think we've heard cross-party sincere good wishes to you, Ms Smith, for the work that you have done and will continue to do in this area. This is now the final session on our consideration before we construct our Stage 1 report, and it has been extremely helpful today. So thank you. And to the rest of the panel, that concludes the public part of our proceedings, and I'll now suspend the meeting to allow our witnesses to leave, and the committee will move to private session. I suspend this meeting.